fulfilling your true purpose if you commit your life to the highest advantage of others. I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad because I'm serving a mission to serve my fellow human being. Because the school system will never teach you about money. They teach people to be poor. Poor people say, I can't afford it, I can't do that, I don't have time, because this is an escape. The reason they're poor is they haven't failed.
It's that fear mentality. You play it safe and you don't introduce new risks into your life.
We've got to change what we teach our kids.
Introduce a real different mindset.
How can I afford it? How can I do that? A question opens the mind, a statement closes the mind. One of the greatest ways to acquire great wealth is playing Monopoly in real life. So my game financially is business, number one. Second is real estate. And that's why I pay no taxes. My success comes from spirituality.
How does a 9-year-old kid in Hawaii, a poor kid, get to this point?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't poor by most people's standards, but I came from a family with a poor attitude, if you know what I mean. Because rich, poor, middle class, poverty starts with a fundamental attitude. So I was in Hawaii, I was 9 years old. My father was the head of education, PhD. Very smart man, good guy. And for some reason, we moved across town and I went to a school with rich kids. So this is a little town called Hilo, Hawaii. It's not on the map anywhere, but it is. It's a sugar plantation town. So when I was 9 years old, I moved to this rich kids school. And suddenly I realized I was poor because it's relative, as Einstein, it's all relative. And my classmates were mostly white guys. And I was one of the few Asians in the class. And these guys, their fathers owned the banks, they owned the plantations, they owned the car dealerships, they owned the meat packing company, they owned the ranches. And I'm going, how come my dad doesn't own that? So I remember raising my hand when I was 9 years old, talking to my fourth grade teacher, and I said, when am I going to learn about money? And she was this woman who should have retired 50 years earlier. She was so sick and tired of kids by this time. She says, the love of money is the root of all evil. And I said, what am I, in Sunday school? I was this punky little 9-year-old kid. And she says, we don't teach money at school. I said, why not? And she couldn't answer me. And she got very flustered. She said, sit down, take your seat. And then I got curious. I said, why don't we learn about money? She says, go ask your father. He's my boss. So my father was the head of education, PhD, all that stuff. I go home and ask him, I said, why don't we learn about money in school? And he looked at me and says, because the government doesn't let us teach that subject. The government tells us what we can teach and what we can't teach. And I thought that was strange. And I said, but aren't we going to school to learn about money? He says, no, your job is to get a job. I said, but you get a job to earn money. He goes, no, you're supposed to just get a job. I went, no. Isn't the purpose of a job to earn money? He goes, you're correct. I said, so why don't I just learn about money? I can skip the job part, And he got flustered and he said, look, and my father was, for Japanese, very tall, 6'4", and imposing man, good guy. But he says, if you want to learn about money, why don't you ask your best friend's father about money? And I said, why? That's Mike. So why ask him? He says, because Mike's father is an entrepreneur. And I said, what are you? He says, I'm an employee. I'm a government employee. I went, oh, what's the difference? He says, the difference is an entrepreneur must know about money, or they're no longer entrepreneurs. And he says an employee doesn't have to know anything about money, because the government will take care of them, the company will take care of them. So I'm all confused.
And it is an amazing book on accounting because it makes it understandable.
Yeah.
I took accounting in business school and I know what you mean.
It's boring.
It's boring.
Yeah.
But it is also a book about your own fears. And I think that's why it resonates with people. Because you're telling them things they know is true. They know when they look in the mirror, they're not making the correct choices. They're not being disciplined. They're doing the wrong thing. And they know they're unhappy, in fear their whole lives, waiting for the next paycheck.
And it's understandable. We all have fear. You know, to be truthful, we all have fear. It's just how you deal with it. And you know, Einstein said, you know, imagination is more important than knowledge, but knowledge empowers imagination. And what most people lack is real business knowledge, like accounting, you know, like debt, like taxes. You got to know that stuff, but they don't teach it in school to anybody. So, and then when people ask me, how did your rich dad learn this when your poor dad, a PhD, didn't? And the answer is very simply, my rich dad, who's kind of my best friend's father, his father died when he was 13. So rich dad had this family business at 13 to run. So he had to drop out of school, which was his blessing. You know, there's blessings, and you know, sometimes the blessing doesn't look like a blessing, but it turned out to be a blessing.
Right?
Well, one of my best teachers was R. Buckminster Fuller, and created the geodesic dome and all that. Yeah. And he was kind of the guy that straightened me out spiritually. And he always talked about he talked about generalized principles, and these are principles that are always true, no exceptions. So if you drop a stone in the water, the ripple always goes out this way. It's called precession. He says there's no exception. You can't drop a stone in the water and there's no ripple. There's always a ripple. So no matter what we do, we're always creating a ripple. So it's called precession. Ephemeralization is our ability to do more with less. So you look at our cell phone now, it has more horsepower than the Sperry computer 50 years ago. You know, that's doing more with less. So humans are getting more and more powerful. We have more power to us. Unfortunately, we're not evolved as human beings. You know, it's horrifying. We're more antagonistic, more antisocial. You know, social media is antisocial. You know, I don't even get on the thing personally. You know, I'm very controlled at what we say, not like Trump, but because it's so antisocial today. People are so antagonistic. That's the danger part. So the reason I'm speaking on spirituality, we got to evolve. You know, it means meditation, it means yoga, it means praying, it means going to church, whatever it takes. But you got to get back to calm and peace and meditation.